Welcome to the Unity BootCamp lesson on attaching an email identity to the user's profile. In this lesson, we're going to cover how to attach an email identity to the user's profile, and just as important, why you'd want to. Let's discuss why you'd want to attach an email identity to the user's profile, as it may not apply to every game or app. If your game or app is going to allow users to authenticate anonymously, then this lesson is for you. As we've established in a previous BootCamp lesson, an anonymous identity can initially be a good thing for the end user, as they are not initially bothered by a login screen on their first playthrough that could potentially turn them off of your game or app. However, one of the pitfalls of having an anonymous identity is that if the user logs out or loses their device, the user's profile is then not recoverable. In your game or app, presenting an anonymous user with the benefits of an authenticated identity and an option to attach one or more authenticated identities to their account would allow them to recover their profile in the event that they logged out or lost their device later. In this lesson, we're going to attach an email identity, but as you can see on the left, there are several different types of authenticated identities that brainCloud supports. The first request is called Attach Email Identity. This request takes in two parameters, an email and a password. Click the JSON response to familiarize yourself with the data that this request returns. The second request is called Get Identities. This request does not take in any parameters, but it's important to note that it only returns authenticated identities. An anonymous identity will not be returned. Click the JSON response to familiarize yourself with the data that this request returns. We're done in the API reference. Let's head into Unity. For this lesson, we're going to change the default email login dialog to allow a user to authenticate with an anonymous identity. As you can see, the email anonymous authentication dialog already exists in the example project. In the hierarchy, click the dialog manager. And then on the right, change the connected email dialog to the email anonymous authentication dialog. Save this scene, and then open Visual Studio and navigate to the network script. Declare 4 public callback delegates, 2 to handle the response for the Get Identities request, and 2 to handle the response for the Attach Email Identity request. Declare a private member variable called Identity Types List that holds a list of strings. Declare a public property to expose the Identity Types list. Scroll down to the bottom. Declare a public method called requestGetIdentities. In the body of the method, we're going to check to see if the user is authenticated. If the user is not authenticated, we'll log in a meaningful error message, and if set, we'll invoke the failed callback delegate. If the user is authenticated, declare success callback lambda. In the body of the lambda, log the response data. Create a JSON object to parse the response data. Then parse the identities array from the root JSON object. Clear the identity types list member variable. Loop through the JSON identities array and then push each key onto the identity types list. If set, invoke the completed callback delegate. Next, declare the failed callback lambda. In the body of the lambda, log an error along with the status message, and if set, invoke the failed callback delegate. Invoke brainCloud's Identity Services Get Identities request. Pass in the success and failure callback lambdas as the arguments. Next, declare a public method called Attach Email Identity. In the body of the method, we're going to check to see if the user is authenticated. If the user is not authenticated, we'll log in a meaningful error message, and if set, we'll invoke the failed callback delegate. If the user is authenticated, declare success callback lambda. In the body of the lambda, log the response data. If the identity type list does not contain an email identity, then we'll add it to the list. If set, invoke the completed callback delegate. Next, declare the failed callback lambda. In the body of the lambda, log an error along with the status message, and if set, invoke the failed callback delegate. Invoke brainCloud's Identity Services Attach Email Identity request. Pass in the email and password parameters and the success and failure callback lambdas as the arguments. Save the file and navigate to the email login dialog script. In the onAnonymous button-click method, delete the to-do comment and in its place, hide the dialog, show the connecting dialog, and invoke the network's request anonymous authentication method. Pass in the completed and failed delegate callbacks as the arguments. Save the file and navigate to the Attach Email dialog script. Declare a pair of private attach email identity delegates. Declare a public method called set. This method takes in the network's attach email identity callback delegates as the parameters. In the body, assign the parameters to the attach email identity delegate member variables. In the onAttach button click method, show the connecting dialog, then invoke the attach email identity method. Pass in the email and password text field values and the attach email identity delegates as the arguments. Save the file and navigate to the dialog manager script. Scroll down and find the show attach email dialog method. Add a pair of parameters so that the method takes in the attach email identity delegates. Then in the body, invoke the attach email dialog's set method. Pass in the attach email identity parameters as the arguments. Save the file and navigate to the brainCloud dialog script. Declare a pair of private callback methods used to handle a completed and failed response to the attach email identity request. Then in the refresh method below, for the attach email button, we're going to change the button's active state to depend on whether the user's account already has an email identity attached to it or not. If the user's profile does have an email identity attached to it, then this button will not be visible to the user. Scroll up and find the onAttached email clicked method. Remove the to-do statement, and in its place, invoke the dialog manager's show attach email dialogs method. Pass in the callback methods that we just declared as the arguments. Save the file and navigate to the game script. Scroll down and find the onAuthentication request completed method. Invoke the network's request get identities method. Save the file and navigate back into Unity. If you need to perform a manual refresh, do so now. Run the game. Most likely, we've reconnected with brainCloud with a previously authenticated email identity from previous lessons. Click brainCloud, then click Logout. Click Login, and when the dialog appears, click Anonymous. We've now authenticated with an anonymous identity. Stop the app, open Safari, and navigate to the brainCloud portal. Click Users, then click User Browser. Click the top user in the list. This is the profile that we just logged in with. Notice that it has an anonymous identity attached to it. Navigate back into Unity and run the app. We've reconnected using the same profile. Click brainCloud, then click Attach Email. Enter a new email and then a password. Click Attach. The email identity is now attached to the user's profile. We can confirm this in the brainCloud portal. Open Safari. Click the user browser, then click the first user again. Notice that now this profile has an email identity attached to it. That means that this profile can be authenticated using the email credentials that were entered a moment ago. Authentication error handling is the next lesson in the Unity Bootcamp.